I want to call up General Rick Hillier to say a few words about a very unique project that he's working on as it relates to veterans, and to really kind of fill us in just a short snippet of the cool things that you're working on.
Yeah, thank you. Jeff, there's no such thing from a Newfoundlander as a few words, okay? So I'll just say that right away here. True story, a little while ago I was giving a talk at lunch in Toronto, about 800 people, and maybe I banged on a bit too long. Halfway through my talk, the guy in the very center got up to start to leave, and it was really distracting because people had to move their chairs and get out of the way, and everybody was looking at him and listening to him, and I was looking at him and listening to him. And finally I stopped and I said, "Sir," and when I did that, the room went absolutely silent. And the guy stood up, I give him credit, stood up, looked back at me, very respectfully, and I said, "Sir, it's very distracting that you have to leave now in the middle of my talk. Did you actually have to leave right now?" And he said, "General Hillier, I apologize, sir," he said. "I have to go for a haircut." And I said, "Oh my God, man, couldn't you have gotten a haircut before we sat down?" He said, "General Hillier, when I sat down, I didn't need a haircut." So there you go. So Jeff, thanks very much for the opportunity to come up here and just say a few things. I look around this room and you ever watch the Muppet Show when they do "This Is Your Life," or Kermit the Frog or the Cookie Monster, "This Is Your Life," and they trot out all those people from your past, and I look around this room and see all those awesome veterans here. And I was talking to Declan down here from the Foot Guards, and he was telling me he was on the guard on the hill there for one summer or what, yeah, and so did that incredible program that we see. And I said, "Hey, I was in the guard for one day when I was Chief of Defence Staff. Myself and the Canadian Forces Chief went over. We trained up for a full day before, got our kit all ready, and the next day we mobilized with the guard down at the university, came up to the armory, marched up to the hill, did the guard. The officer came around, inspected me, and said, okay, and let it go. And if you ever want to do something in your life that's like part of an exciting team, where teamwork and precision and leadership and fitness and paying attention to detail matters, go out and look at that guard or become part of that guard. It's just an awesome thing here. So, Declan, thank you for what you have done. And to the ladies and gentlemen in the room here who are veterans and who are the mothers of veterans, lady back here I have a special love for, and her daughter is joining the Canadian Forces right now. Thank you for all that you have done. And again, I look around the room and I see Minister Anita Anand, with whom I have had a great relationship and I have much respect for. And I know, Blake, thank you for your support in what's happening. And Pauline is here to move the petition forward tomorrow. And of course, Evan Solomon used to interview me way back when. He was a bit of a dick then. I'm not sure what he's like now, but at that stage in life he was. And so we appreciate what you do. And leadership comes in many forms. I just say that to all of you. And thank you for your leadership in all those various forms. We're an awesome country, and we can be even, as I used to say to our troops, awesomer. We can be even greater, and so thank you for that leadership. Ladies and gentlemen, tomorrow, Pauline, with the support of Blake, is going to present a petition in the House of Commons, E6661, which is a petition to asking the Parliament to establish an independent review board to review the awards of our soldiers to see that we got it right. And we use the example of Private Jess La Rochelle from 2006 as the example of maybe, just maybe, it's worthy of a fresh look, and maybe the richness of detail and the knowledge that we have now these days that we did not have during the assessment of his actions back in October of 2006 makes a difference, and we should review. But in any case, we should review. Every other nation that we sort of are allied with, are friends with, have done it. The Americans do it on a routine basis, and you've probably seen pictures or video of presidents in the Oval Office putting the Medal of Honor around a 99-year-old man or something along that line, because they went back, relooked, and then came up and said, it wasn't right. The Australians did it with a young 19-year-old sailor from 1942 who was killed fighting for his ship, and about 4 years ago, made the representation to the Queen and presented him the Victoria Cross. New Zealand has done it, the Brits have done it, and I think we can actually do it too. And I'll just talk about Jess La Rochelle for a minute or so. And he was a young man, a baby-faced young man, a soldier out of Nipissing, Ontario, up near North Bay. Quiet, worked as hard as anybody you could ever meet. He joined the Canadian Forces and deployed to Afghanistan on the 14th of October 2006 with his platoon. And a platoon is normally 3 sections of 8 soldiers plus a small platoon headquarters. They deployed into Strong Point Center in Kandahar province. Strong Point Center was a mud-walled compound, partially broken down with some mud-drying towers and huts around it. And we had established a defensive position there to help provide security for a road that was being built to allow the Afghans to get the crops that they grew to market, so that maybe they could take zucchinis and honeydew melons and all those things about which they bragged and make a living from it, and not have to do cocaine and heroin and that kind of stuff. They moved in at just before lunch hour, got intelligence that an attack was coming in. Only 2 sections of the platoon are there, because one is back in Kandahar because of some other challenges. And 2 sections moved in. They got intelligence right away that a large attack by the Taliban was coming in. The master corporal who was running the section, Jeremy LeBlanc, now Sergeant Major Jeremy LeBlanc in Petawawa, said, I've got to put somebody up in that tower. We don't have enough troops to put 2 people up there, and that's our basic rule, always 2 people in a position. So I can only put 1. Do I have a volunteer? And that young baby-faced soldier from Nipissing stuck his hand up, went into the tower about 2 o'clock, and about 15 minutes later, the Taliban attacked. Up to about 40 fighters attacking directly towards that tower. Heavy machine gun fire coming in towards him, going to the rest of the platoon also in the mud-walled compound. In the opening minutes, Jess is pouring machine gun fire back at that attack, and a rocket-propelled grenade came through one of the openings in the tower, detonated on the back wall that was part of where Jess was, and Jess went unconscious. And he said to me long after, he said, sir, it was just like Star Wars. I came to, I'd been out for a few seconds, I came to, and there was flashing lights and things going off. He said, I got back on my feet. He had a C7 machine gun, 7.62 machine gun. He had about 800 rounds there. He fired them all, except for about 75 to 100. And he kept that as a last-ditch resistance. And then he started picking up, he had about 15, 16 M72 rocket launchers. And for all the soldiers there know of what I'm talking about, it's just a cardboard tube about yay long, about yay big. You extend it out, the sight pops up, you pop the end caps off it, you put it on your shoulder, you pull the safety out, and you fire that sucker. And if you're within about 10 feet, you can probably hit something. More than that is pretty challenging. And he started firing those rockets one at a time at each of the Taliban fighters as they would get up and move towards him. Bang it off, throw it away, bang it off, throw it away, bang it off. And eventually the firepower that he brought was so heavy that the attack broke up. They'd had enormous casualties, compliments of his fire, and the attack broke off, and the Taliban started falling back slightly, knowing they were going to come back again, though. Jess stayed there. Lieutenant Ray Corby, as platoon commander, moved up to the tower. Said I was bounding up there. We were still getting some incoming fire. So I looked at what was left of the tower, and I thought, nobody can be alive in there. And he said that little head popped up, and it was Jess Larochelle, who said, sir, I'll provide some covering fire. Come on in. And Ray went in, and he said, got the sort of situation report from Jess about what had happened. And he said, good, we're going to replace you now up here. And Jess said, sir, do not do that. Don't impose that on somebody else. I've been here. I know the lay of the land. I know where they're coming. I will stay and carry on the fight. And Ray said, we can't reinforce you till at least after dark. And Jess said, sir, I've got it. And Ray left about 2:30, 2:45, went back down. Jess stayed in the fight in that tower by himself till after dark that night, after about 8:30. Got reinforced with one other soldier. The next morning, they were replaced by another company that moved in. Jess went with his platoon, and they went back to Kandahar Airfield. And the reason they went back was during the night they lost 2 of their soldiers in that platoon who were killed in the firefight. And Jess Larochelle, again, that baby-faced young Canadian, went back to help carry the body of his best friend, Private Blake Williamson, onto the aircraft coming back to Canada in his final journey home. It was only after he had helped carry the body back into the C-130 and paid his respects to it. He went to one of our medics and said, I'm hurting a little bit. Well, what we discovered, he had a detached retina in his right eye. I've never had a detached retina, but I hear it's one of the more painful things that you can have. His eardrums were broken. He had a concussion. He had a vertebrae broken in his neck, and his back was broken. All of this from that rocket blast that knocked him up against a steel-hard mud wall that had been baked in the desert sun for literally hundreds of years. And obviously, we evacuated him from theater. He was treated abysmally, I will tell you that, in the 2 weeks sort of following that, left on his own, left without support to come back to Canada. And we had to go out and learn a whole bunch of lessons on how truly to look after our people. He came back to Canada. His injuries were severe. They followed him around for years. And eventually, about 2.5 years ago, we lost Jess LaRochelle to those wounds and to the medical treatments which were trying to help him recover from those wounds, and we lost that boy far too early. You know, that richness of detail about him volunteering to go into that tower, about his incredible bravery and almost being out of ammunition and having to save some for a last-ditch attack, about volunteering to stay there for the rest of the afternoon so some other poor soldier didn't get it put in that position by himself. And then despite all of that, staying there overnight, and then despite being in such horrible pain, went the next day to help carry the body of his friend Blake onto that airplane. Jess LaRochelle was awarded the Star of Military Valor. I chaired the Honors and Awards Committee that awarded that Star of Military Valor, and I went back in the theater a couple of weeks later. The commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Omar Lavoie, was there. I went for a little walk with him, stuck my arm around his shoulders, and I said, you know, Jess, we were that close. Star of Military Valor, Victoria Cross. And at the end of it, we decided Star of Military Valor. And one of the reasons, there were several reasons we did it, but, you know, first of all, we were new to war. Right? This was early 2006. We were new to war. We hadn't been in a fight like this since Korea. And this was a new business for all of us. Secondly, I kind of joke about this, but it was really truth in a very real way, was the fact that we kind of thought that we were much like the French figure skating judge from those infamous Olympics, where she saved her marks when the French skaters would come and compete, so she'd have good marks to give them. We kind of thought, you know, that's a pretty incredible act of valor. But what if something greater comes along, and, you know, how are we going to be? And so I think we sort of kept our powder dry just a little bit. We didn't know all that detail about volunteering to go up there, about how badly he was wounded, and the fact that he volunteered to stay on, and that he was there by himself again, which we never do in the military. And we think Jess LaRochelle, his file should get a review. Somebody said to me, you know, oh, but there's a 5-year window on whether or not the Victoria Cross can be awarded. If it hasn't been awarded 5 years after that event, it can't be awarded. I said, you know, let's go back and look. That rule was put in place by King Edward back in 1905. How much have we changed since 1905? Every freaking thing in our entire society, right? It's our medal. We can change the rules. We can do whatever we want with it. But here's what I would tell you. I think if we reviewed those files from Afghanistan as a start, and we can decide to go elsewhere after if we wish, that would be a wonderful thing to do. And maybe Jess LaRochelle, maybe a guy like Rick Stacey, maybe a guy like Sean Teal, any of those Star of Military Valor winners. And I would commend you to go to the National Post series of last year, Heroes Among Us, and just read their stories. Oh my Lord, it inspires you of what they did. Just maybe one of them, perhaps even two, perhaps even three, God knows, might be decided that they should get to the Canadian Victoria Cross. That's what we're going to do, and say to Pauline tomorrow and Blake for thank you. We're going to do a press conference in the morning, we're going to do a luncheon, and you're going to bring it just after question period, I understand, to the House for a unanimous motion, a unanimous consent motion. And we've got the support of 5 provincial governments. We've got the support of 16,000 Canadians who've signed the petition, right? And we've got the support of a lot more than that. And that's what we are going to do tomorrow. And why are we doing it? We're doing it for Canada, because this is an awesome thing for our veterans, and it's, I think, richly deserved, and it's appropriate responsibility for our nation. So here we are with all the veterans tonight. Jeff, you and Coding for Veterans, you're doing an awesome job. You with the University of Ottawa, with companies like IBM, that's incredible. Keep up that great work. I always believe if you want somebody to come and work with you, who's a leader, who doesn't panic, who will work, doesn't matter what the clock is, right? Who have a sense of humor, who love belonging to the best teams in the world and work to create that, you don't have to look any further than a veteran. And when you can bring them in and give them the kind of transitional training and then experience in something like AI as an example, man, you've got a war winner right there. And which company in the world and which nation wouldn't want those kind of people working for you? Thanks very much, Jeff, what you do. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Thanks, Jeff.